All right, hello everybody. I'm back again with another video, and everybody knows Bill Silvey, and I'm going to let our new guest go ahead and introduce himself and say where he's from, and then we'll get to why here in a minute. So take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm Robson Michael, and I'm a Brazilian artist for D&D. And well, here I am to talk about whatever comes to our minds.
Yeah, exactly. So, I've been a fan of D&D since about 1982. Bill's been playing since slightly before then. And one of the things that I find interesting, especially lately, is there's always a lot of division in art. We're not going to talk about any of that, but the art over the years has transformed a lot because the tools have transformed, right? So, like in 1982, what you could put on a book cover was sort of that's as good as you're going to do, right? And now it's come a long way, and you could do these with no problem. And to get something like that out in the early 80s, that was a Herculean task, right? Now it's a lot different to put stuff on paper and put stuff in a book now. But what I think people miss because we've got so much art hitting the street is kind of the process that comes along with it. And I wanted to show off your page full of stuff that you have over on your ArtStation page
Oh, really? Yeah.
and just kind of go through a couple of them and talk about your process and what it's like to work with different people because some of these are Dungeons and Dragons. Obviously, I think that one was for Critical Role,
Yeah, Explorer's Guide to Wildemount.
right?
It was actually my first work for Wizards of the Coast.
Was this one right here?
Yeah.
Um, and what I like about your page is that not only do you show the finished product, which I think is great, but so I've got kids, some of whom are interested in art, and they see this and they get intimidated. And I'm like, guys, it doesn't start there. But you actually show your process and your sort of mood of discovery as you go through what it's going to look like, which I thought was really cool for somebody to kind of put these sort of stages up there so that people can see that it does evolve. It doesn't just magically appear one day, in this finished product. But that's really cool of you to put that kind of stuff out there. So this was one that was done for Wizards of the Coast, and you've got a few others in here that are Dungeons and Dragons based. And I'm going to guess all of these were commissioned by Wizards, but there's one I wanted to talk about first that struck me offhand. That's this guy right here. So, what made you want to go back and do the Dungeon Master from the old Dungeons and Dragons cartoon?
Oh, well, the story starts around 2015 when I was still working as a graphic designer. I have a degree in design,
Mhm.
and I was starting to learn digital painting on the side because since my childhood, my passion was to draw.
Mhm.
Uh, I started playing D&D around the year 2000. Actually, my first quest was the module called First Quest. It was 1 year before the third edition was announced,
Mhm.
I guess. And I always liked to draw the characters that I played. And so when I was working as a graphic designer, I was still in touch with the new editions,
Mhm.
Magic the Gathering, fantasy in general through books, movies, comics, and I was learning digital painting on the side, and I thought, well, what can I do as a personal project? What is the piece that I can create to test my knowledge,
Mhm.
all that I've been learning so far? And I thought it would be a really interesting um, exercise to redesign the characters from the old Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. Like, not just redesign them, but think about what if they are still there? What
Mhm.
if they got old in that world? And I started actually with Shayla, the rogue,
Mhm.
and I kept doing this every year. I try to redesign one of the characters, and then the dungeon master was the last one. I thought, well, I have to paint paint him. I have to make an homage. I have to finish this. And he he's this character that here in Brazil he is actually pretty famous. The cartoon is really famous here, and we have all this. Just for you guys to know, there are all these legends and rumors about the last episode, like people here were believing. I don't know if this rumor started in United States or somewhere else, but the idea that they were dead and that dimension was actually hell and the dungeon master was the devil or something like that. It was something
Well,
really
it,
crazy, but it always had this mystic around it,
mhm.
like that unfinished cartoon that we all grew up with. And I decided to paint him and uh, show this aspect that he is the dungeon master.
Mhm.
He is the this character that tries to personify the real world role of being a dungeon master, which is to guide to adventures, to welcome the players, to promise a lot of wonderful moments, quests.
Mhm.
He's mysterious. He always have this smile that it's unnerving sometimes.
Well,
You actually hate this character a lot of times, but you end up loving him for it.
so Bill's
And
kind of the forever DM because I'm in Bill's Tuesday night game that gets streamed. So
oh,
so he's
really?
been a DM forever, and I've discovered that when the dungeon master smiles like that, something bad's about to happen. It's,
Yeah,
it's
I'm actually a DM right now
uh-huh.
for Rime of the Frost Maiden campaign, and it's hard not to think what would the Dungeon Master from the cartoon do in this situation, how he would address the characters, how he would be mysterious and
So
that kind of stuff.
I do have a question. Is all of these are straight into digital? You don't do pencil drawings at all first, or are these
Sometimes, yes. I don't usually post them. I
okay?
have some sketchbooks around here where I try to just develop ideas.
Hmm.
I try to sketch something, and it's really simple. Just simple strokes, just to make me think about pose, composition. I make a lot of squares.
Mhm.
Well, I think I can show something here through the
Well,
camera. Let
I
me
love your use of shading in digital. That's not easy to get done properly. You even the little robes, the folds in his robes, you can kind of see the shade underneath it. That's impressive work.
here. Oh, and it's that's a reason why I don't post it because it's really messy and it's really like it's just for me. So I understand what I'm trying to convey there, but I don't think it's a really good way to illustrate the process. So when I already have an idea, something that I believe can become a full illustration, I make a thumbnail, and then I do it again, like 3 times, usually more times. Actually, it's funny because in the work that I've done for Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, I remember doing a lot of thumbnails for One Piece. And their director at the time, Kate Irwin, she said, actually, most of these thumbnails would work. You don't need to send so many ideas. And then I tried to
So
reduce it to
this this
three.
this one right here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
as you
that's
can see.
yeah. You had quite a few of them down here. So
Yeah, 6 thumbnails. And there
yeah.
were some thumbnails that I didn't send. And
Oh,
then she
wow.
said, well, you can send three. That's good.
That's an impressive bit of work. So Bill, is there one that
Thanks.
stands out to you? Because I've got another one that stood out to me, but I want to see if you had one on this page that kind of stood out you wanted to ask about.
Well, as the resident cheerleader for Greyhawk, of course, I go in for anything with Igwilv. So
I
your
figured he'd go
your
there.
Tasha's cauldron of everything, I kick open the door to that room and I take a look at her and I'm like, you know what? I've had a good run here. I'll just put my sword down. It's been okay. But no, I think your dungeon master is lovely, and that Tasha one really I Gary would have loved your Igwil
Thanks.
there, because of course, the great Jeff Easley has a gorgeous pencil drawing of her in S4, Lost Caverns of Sojkanth, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with, if you looked at a
I
lot of
might
the
have seen
older art,
it already. There was a
but
lot of references.
he's got her daughter Drelsna in the module. But despite the fact that he talks about Igwilv a lot, we don't have uh, a picture of her in the module. And I think you do it a lot of justice, because she's just, obviously just as lovely as her daughter. So well done. You
Mm.
two thumbs up from me. And I did want to mention a couple of things about the D&D cartoon before I forget. Um, and Tim, you may or may not know this, but the D&D cartoon never got the traction in the United States after its run through on our CBS network here, because in the United States, for a TV show to get picked up for syndication, that is, shown on other networks, on reruns and that sort of thing, here you have to have a minimum of 100 episodes.
Oh,
And
wow.
because of financial problems at TSR, Gary had to rush back to Wisconsin and save TSR from financial ruin. And in doing so, contractually, he was the one who approved scripts for every episode. He had to read them through and make sure they weren't misrepresenting the game or the characters. And that was simply not a ball he could juggle. Of course, this is 1982. It wasn't like, yeah, email me the script and I'll take a look at it and send it back to you same day. So here in the United States, we never got a second run, so it slipped under the waves. But down in Brazil, I started to hear in the 90s, when I was playing other TTRPGs, and I kind of let D&D go by the wayside for a number of years. I actually worked in a very touristy part of Orlando, Florida, and we would have basically Brazilian Gen Xers, kids in their 20s, my age at the time, who would come in and dig through our videotape section looking for the D&D cartoon on VHS to take them and watch. And I was like, yeah, I remember that. Of course we don't have it. And, they'd go disappointed. And I would just think, why would they care about that? But because it was a huge hit in Brazil. Um,
Yeah.
and there was a final episode that was written but never
Requiem,
filmed.
right?
Requiem, exactly, where the
Requiem.
kids get a chance to go home, but they decide to stay in the realm.
Really? Because the one that I've read, it ends with them deciding if they were going to through a portal or not, and it ended right there, like leaving it open. The one that I've read. I don't know if it's the real one.
I
There's
know it was I know it was titled Requiem, and they faced a decision at the end. And I had read that they decided to stay, but it may have ended on a cliffhanger, like you say.
yeah,
Yeah.
uh,
Uh, just for you to know how it impacts, I believe you have already seen it. If not, well, it there was a commercial
The car
and
commercial, and
yeah,
it
the car
is
commercial here in
awesome.
Brazil.
yeah,
I
That,
love it.
well,
yeah,
that's
the
how people here were obsessed with it.
oh, the car commercial was probably better than half the other stuff we've gotten from people after years. But I liked the fact that in the Dungeons and Dragons movie, there was actually an homage to the cartoon.
Oh yeah, that was
So
huge in the movie for me.
it was pretty cool that they were sort of hiding in the background at one spot, because I always look for those little Easter eggs in movies, because I don't know if it plays in Brazil, but The Sound of Music is sort of a thing that happens every Christmas up here. They play the movie The Sound of Music, which was based on the Von Trapp family leaving Germany during World War II. And years ago, I worked with somebody who was married to a Von Trapp granddaughter. So like one of the actual granddaughters of the Von Trapp kids was this guy's wife. And it turned out Maria von Trapp was actually in the background in The Sound of Music. So if you know where to look, you'll actually see Maria von Trapp and two of her daughters kind of walking around in the background. So I always look for those little Easter egg kind of things because there's
Oh,
most
that's so
movies
cool.
have them if you kind of know where to look.
Yeah.
And I'm always trying to find ones that people don't realize are there. So it's like you'll see in Lee Child stuff, like the new Jack Reacher stuff. You'll see Lee Child pops up in a scene everywhere. Like Stephen King shows up. You know, lots of authors just kind of like show up as an extra, which I think is kind of cool.
Oh yeah. Stephen King
But
is the library guy in the last It movie, right?
Yeah.
he pops up somewhere all the time, right? He
Yeah.
just sort of
I
shows
love
up.
these Easter eggs.
His are interesting.
Like
Uh,
Hitchcock was in every one of his
Oh,
movies.
Hitchcock did too. So another one of your pieces that really caught me, and I found where I can order it. I'm probably going to order a print. Was this one, and I thought Bill, you'd appreciate this one. It's a Warhammer 40K.
Oh,
Yeah.
Marvin.
And this is impressive work, sir. I mean, this is just huge. I love the hydraulics coming across here. You got this big blaster cannon. You got sort of
Oh,
the arm
big shout out
extension.
to Games Workshop because in terms of reference, they got it covered because they don't send you concepts, they send you the miniature, really detailed one,
Mhm,
pictures of all angles.
mhm.
So uh, the level of detail there, I only could achieve it with confidence because I knew the source and it it's an amazing universe. Aesthetically, you can you might not like the lore, maybe you
Mhm.
don't like the game, but aesthetics you have to give it to them. Like it's it's a holy person, it's a nun in
Mhm.
a mech suit. So
Sisters of
it's hard to
Battle.
top that. Yeah,
Hey, I went to Catholic school. You don't mess with nuns, man. They're not. When they say
exactly.
do something, you just do it. You don't
Yeah.
question it. But even the detail work down here on the weapon, it's incredible how much detail you have in this. This is one to be proud of. When I saw that, I was like, oh my God, that's just phenomenal. Um, and there was one under Elder Scrolls and Legends that I looked at because one of the things I always look at is the detail level work. Because yeah, if you look at like Salvador Dali or some of the Impressionists, some of that is not some of that work. It's impressive work, and I love it, but the little details aren't really there. And sometimes those little details take an enormous amount of time to do. And all of these are impressive, but the symmetry on the bone structure on this must have taken forever to get these to line up properly. And even the shadow like coming through it looks like the shadow's coming through the rib cage on this guy's arm. Just the amount of
Yeah,
time and care you took on that.
yeah. This piece was an exercise in anatomy knowledge, and I decided to study bones a lot for it.
Mm,
And Elder Scrolls in particular, they like this almost well, sometimes photo bashed and using real world textures.
mm,
Um, and if they could, they would pose characters, real people, every time they could. And that's really particular with their style. And it was a challenge, and I really enjoyed it. It's like not just drawing, but knowing the source. For example, when I finished that skeleton, I got a lot of knowledge that I didn't have previously that I thought I had, like
mm.
bone structures. But when you start to dig uh, in a deeper way, you start to realize that there's there are ways to improve your knowledge, and it's a process. It's not an end in itself. It's always part of the process to go back to a piece of anatomy, to go back to the real world inspiration, trying to understand it better, know where it comes from. I, I do this a lot. For example, when I'm designing someone's armor, I like to uh, check, oh, where does this armor come from? How does it work, how can I use these as inspiration and not just create nothing against it, but I don't like to create fantasy armor that I don't know how it would fit or how it would work.
Well, I think that's what makes your work stand apart, right? So it's like if you look back at other artists, because I'm a big fan of sort of the classical era of art. So I go back sort of Salvador Dali is sort of one of the newer ones I kind of have looked at extensively over the years. But if you look at Da Vinci, right? Da Vinci used to like go take
Oh yeah,
corpses and like, do autopsies on corpses to understand just how, where does everything connect, just so if a hand was flexing a certain way, he can get the forearm to look exactly right. So he actually dissected people to try to figure that one out. So he went crazy with it. But the results are the results, right? You
yeah.
can't. His works. How many hundreds of years has Da Vinci's work been held amongst the masters, right? And people can copy it, but do it yourself the first time. You can't.
I can give the source of this quote, but
uh,
I've read that Da Vinci used art as a way to understand the world in a better way. So art wasn't the end by itself. He wanted to understand the world, and art emerged from this interest. And I think that's fantastic. It's an amazing way to
Definitely.
see.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of really high-end scientists I worked with over the years, and I spent a long time at a pretty major university. A lot of them are very into art, or they're into classical music, or they're into music in some form, right? So I find it interesting that the art and the science guys are always kind of thinking along the same lines. It's not really about the art or the science. It's about, I want to understand something, and I want to understand it at a very basic level. And Da Vinci was, sort of a scientist of his time. He didn't just do art; he did mechanical stuff. He did all kinds of things during the Renaissance. So he was sort of the guy you go to for, hey, you want a new chapel painted, or do you want me to build a helicopter that's probably going to crash? But we're going to try, right? So uh,
Uh, Yeah, he's the generalist, right?
yeah.
He's the one that, well, I'm not going to do just one thing.
All right. He was a generalist. So, Bill, you have any questions for our artist of the day?
I do, and I want to talk a little bit about the practical stuff. First of all, I think Space Hulk is the best game that Games Workshop ever made. I love Space Hulk.
Nice.
It is like a cut down, lean and mean 40K that is basically rips off the movie Aliens, and I love everything about it. But I was wondering, are you familiar with the works of Masamune Shirow, the Japanese manga artist?
Not, I don't recognize the name right now.
He did Appleseed and Ghost in the Shell.
Oh,
Were a
Ghost in the
couple of
Shell,
his.
right? The
Um,
manga, right?
yeah, Shiro's work. I love Shiro's work for exactly the
So,
reason you're saying.
yeah, yeah,
His
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
is eminently practical. Like his powered armor suits. I've got a few art books by him, and just for clarity's sake, Tim knows this, but for the audience and for your sake, I couldn't draw a stick figure if my life depended on it.
So you're talking about
Um,
this one right here.
Yes, Ghost in the Shell and Appleseed. But when in his art books, he talks about his approach to mechanical design. And like, he doesn't just stuff a bunch of cables in a place because they look cool. He'll release data books like, this is a coolant cable, this is a power cable, this is a communications fiber optic cable, and the reason this thing's hips are big and outsized is because they'd have to have flywheels with X amount of braking horsepower to drive the legs. I
Uh,
mean,
I
just
think that's just amazing because as a
gets into the
fantasy
weeds.
artist, I will confess, I'm intimidated by science fiction because exactly by what you said. I don't know anything about electricity, conductivity, and engineering and physics in general. Like I'm such a nerd that I always like to watch YouTube videos like, oh, this is what scientists think about dark matter. And I end up watching just thinking, well, maybe I'll learn something new, but I'm not a scientist. Like,
Right.
So
and when I want to draw something in fantasy, I think it's so much easier to say just, well, I have some grasp of some natural laws of our reality, and then I extrapolate in magical ways. And it's always something, most of the time, in an organic way. Like, I don't need such technical drawings to create something. But when I see not just like Katsuhiro Otomo, the guy from Akira,
Yes.
like
Love
that,
Otomo's
it's
work.
oh, even Akira Toriyama, when you see the vehicles,
Mhm.
the props, the buildings, you see, oh, it's like they have love for each line over there. Kim Jung-gi, like the way that guy draws motorcycles, cars, uh,
Mhm. You can just
ships, battleships.
you can just lose yourself in the details, and
So
it's so
Exactly.
wonderful.
it's funny. There's a documentary on, I want to say it was on Netflix or YouTube or someplace, that was they were restoring Ecto One, the car from the original Ghostbusters,
Oh,
to put it in the new one, and they had Dan Aykroyd come after it was restored to look through it. And Dan Aykroyd's like going through it. Yeah, well, this was the switch that we put in because we needed a cooling line to go back to the nuclear reactor. And he's like explaining what each thing did in
wow.
really deep scientific
Yes.
terms. And I'm like, he's a bigger nerd than I am, which was cool. But I got to
Yeah,
tell you two
Aykroyd's
things about
great.
dark matter, because I used to work with a professor who's now, or was, a department chair at MIT, whose career was trying to detect dark matter. He was a dark matter detection expert, among other things. But dark matter was first theorized by this professor in California named Fritz Zwicky. Okay. Fritz had a saying. He had three types of people in his life. He was a scientist that everybody should know about because he did some fantastic discoveries, but he was kind of an asshole. Nobody really liked him very much. So he's kind of been written out of the history books over the years. But dark matter was one of his. He was the guy that first theorized and kind of proved dark matter exists. He couldn't find it, but he proved it was there. He used to get into arguments with Einstein. He was a contemporary of Einstein's, and he and Einstein would argue things out, and good things would come out of it. But Fritz had three people in his life, three types of people in his life. If you did what he told you to do and you didn't argue with him, he thought you were okay. And really just okay. It wasn't any better than that. That was good in Fritzland. The second kind of people, they would do what they were told, but they would kind of ask questions, and he would call them bastards. And the third people would argue a lot, and he would call them spherical bastards. And one day somebody asked him, he's like, Fritz, what's a spherical bastard? He's like, well, whatever angle you look at them from, they're still a bastard. Uh, which I was like, and I'm looking that up going, that can't possibly be true. So I went and found some people that worked with him, like, oh yeah, that was Fritz. I was like, okay.
That's
And the other one is my friend at MIT who was working on dark matter and still hasn't found it. There's different types of dark matter. One is called weakly interacting massive particles, or
wimps.
the acronym is WIMPs, right? So I'm
Yeah.
like, you're at MIT searching for WIMPs and you can't find them. Okay. So it was a running
Wow.
gag for years. I didn't mean to give us off track of the artwork,
Well,
but yeah, even scientists have their sense of humor on occasion. So it's
the
yeah.
other
Hey, I have to say, I'm an artist with ADHD, so for me to sidetrack something, it's my way of living, you know?
I
So
think
the
that,
other question I had for you is, I mean, by modern standards, when it comes to your experience with D&D, you're a grognard, man. You started in 2000, right?
Yeah, third
That
edition was the one that I really
yeah,
played a lot.
and that's only 19 years after I started. So I mean, you're closer to my time than you are to modern times.
Yeah,
Think about that.
yeah.
So with that said, for whatever value of old school you wish to assign, do you go back and look at old school art and draw any inspiration from it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I always like to see what was done before, not just to, well, there's a small chance that sometimes we end up creating something that it's too similar to something that was already made, but
Mhm.
that's not the most of it. It's to understand what was shown, what the artist tried to evoke previously, just to see, well, what do I have to work with? What do I like about this concept that I want to show and how to make it mine in a way, like my view. And there's this part of the process as an artist, but also, and I'm not ashamed of it, there's the reverence for something that I was seeing, for something that I was admiring when I was younger. To be able to create something in the same world or universe uh, as other great artists make me look at their work and just admire it sometimes, and to use this as inspiration. For example,
Like
we can see,
something like this, like I can see the inspiration coming from 4 or 5 different pieces for this one. This is an incredible piece of work.
yeah, like for example, this one, I can remember seeing the works of Frazetta and seeing how he makes the characters appear with the background is always there's always some mist, there's always clouds or something in a gaseous form, pretty organic, like the characters are emerging from it somehow. And I like that that aesthetic and that use of colors. And uh, by looking at this work, I fall in love with certain aspects, and then I can try to evoke this aspect in a different way.
So it's funny
So
you mentioned Frazetta, because when I saw that piece, this was the first image that popped in my head, was actually this one.
yeah, absolutely. The angle from, like, you're under the character, you're looking like you're looking up to it, like this character is higher than life.
Mhm.
It's one of the ways to show something epic. It's like putting the point of view of someone really close to the ground.
Mhm.
You're
Well, like the
not,
Frazetta, I was just going to say, like the Frazetta piece, you've of course got the classic triangle form
yeah,
going on there. Although I might suggest, this isn't a criticism, this is just an observation.
all right.
She has a bit too much clothes on to be an exact Frazetta. So,
Yeah. I toned that down because I wanted to be faithful to the character's concept. It's
right,
a character
right.
from Critical Role. It's
And you want to get paid by your contractors, not told what's wrong with you, man.
uh, funny enough, that piece it was not paid for. It's a fan art that I just
Oh,
made it to show my love for fantasy art and the character, of course.
well, it's lovely.
Oh, thanks.
But Bill, do you have any other questions?
Um, this is so boilerplate. I apologize for asking this, but it's one of those things I always like to hear different perspectives on. What is your advice to a person who's looking to get into professional illustration these days?
Oh wow. Well, be a nerd about it. Like I think, in my experience, that's what got me to Wizards of the Coast. I believe it was right. It was after doing a lot of fan arts of these characters from the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, but also from Critical Role, and in keep creating fantasy stuff that I like to present my players when I was playing as a DM. It was the result of me thinking about the characters that I wanted to create, and I like that this fantasy world. I like this team, and I like some type of aesthetics from it, some kind of style, this realism. And I kept doing it because I enjoyed it and I wanted to know more about it. And when you do that for some time, you end up getting the skills that art directors from the same brands they want in an artist. Something that happens a lot when I'm working with D&D is that piece from Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. When they described me what was going to be in the piece, the white dragon and the demon, I think it's a Glabrezu. Yeah, it's a Glabrezu. And I was like, well, I remember watching the episode where these two creatures appear and fight on the Critical Role stream. So as a fan that consumed that was watching it, I already had some reference, already had some idea of the impact of that on the viewers, the emotional stakes that were there. You can check descriptions. I think it's easier for the art director to commission pieces when you already know what they're talking about without having to detail it a lot. You know, when they talk, paint a red dragon. Well, I know red dragons. I already know their designs. I remember drawing red dragons based on Lockwood's concepts, third edition. For me, Todd Lockwood is the Da Vinci of dragons. Like what he has done with anatomy, study, all that stuff, and it helps to, I guess, make the art director feel like, oh, I can give this work to this person, and I will let her do what she wants, because what she wants is probably what I want to. A great piece for Dungeons and Dragons, in my case, for example.
So do they give you a lot of freedom when when Wizards of the Coast comes knocking? They just kind of like, hey, we need one that does this. Is it sort of your concept, or do they kind of give you the concept
It depends on the piece. For example, Tasha, they already had the concept, the design. They have the all this references, but her throne, I designed it, so they let me do that.
Mhm.
She already had the clothes, the crown. It was already, I think it was created by Sean Wood. The concepts were from him, but I have the freedom to create the characters. Sometimes they ask for a character. If you go to the Tasha's work, there's a piece where I had to create a rogue, for example. And I thought, oh, when I was creating this character, it was said, oh, a rogue. But in my mind was, okay, it's a rogue. But what subclass? It's an assassin, it's a thief, it's an arcane trickster. Oh, it's a human. Okay, but what are his stats? And I thought, oh, maybe he has a good charisma, so that's why he's always with that smirk, and that's why he keeps his sword under the cloak, so he doesn't show the sword too much. He prefers to resolve it by talking. And I create these characters in my mind using the rules of the game most of the time before creating them. So it has some synergy with what I do as a player.
Well,
So I think that
it's nice to have that kind of freedom to be able to put things in like that. They must trust you a lot. So one last question. I don't want to take up everybody's all day. And when I post this video, I'm going to post all the links to your website so like people could take a look for
oh, nice.
themselves and dig
Thanks.
in. But if you had to pick one of the classic D&D artists as sort of your hero, like so you've got those original four guys, who's
Ooh,
your hero?
okay. I have to say the one that most impacted me in a way that I thought, oh damn, I think I want to work with this because I really like. I guess it's Todd Lockwood.
Todd Lockwood?
Yeah, because it wasn't just the final piece that I saw on the covers.
Mhm.
When I started drawing, the painting aspect of the covers intimidated me. Like, oh, I know how to draw with pencil, but I don't know nothing about real painting. So I don't know if I could be a painter one day to this. So when I saw the first image of the third edition, and I saw the concepts, and they were all made in a way that I thought, oh, maybe I can do something like that with a pencil. I was like, there's room for it, and that, well, that opened so many doors in my mind. Like, I went to sketching like obsessively.
I'm going to show you the one that for me proved when I was a kid. So I started playing in the early 80s. I started reading the Dragonlance books when there were only two on the streets. So but there was a piece of artwork to me that really said, yeah, for me, it was more about the game, and the artwork was just sort of an added plus, right? But there was one piece of art that when it hit the streets, I was like, oh my God, the artwork to this stuff is really kind of, world class in the fantasy world. And it was this piece by Larry Elmore. This particular one to me
Oh,
said
Dragonlance, right?
yeah, said more about the merging of the art and the story than anything else, because here you can actually see the hole in Sturm, right? So the blood coming out from under the armor, the detail on his armor, even the chainmail. And this is not CGI, right? This was oil on canvas at this point. The detail on the
Oh,
chainmail
chainmails. Oh
is
man,
just
chainmails. I finished a piece a couple of weeks ago with a chainmail, and oh man.
see artists do that. They're like, oh God, not chainmail, no. Um,
Yeah.
and the other one was, so I read someplace that one of the early map makers, Bilford Greyhawk, actually, when they had to do the forest with all the trees, uh,
Mhm.
put the name of the forest in huge letters so they would have to draw fewer trees.
Yes.
It was like,
So Darlene, the artist Darlene, who did the Greyhawk map,
yeah.
she had a massive piece of canvas that she drew and painted that on.
Mhm.
And she would have to like lay across it to do it. And then they photo reduced it down to the 5x7 map, or is it 3x5? I don't remember the size of the paper maps you get in the Greyhawk set, but yes, that's very, very true. She the put the names in large so she would have to do fewer trees in the forest.
Well, map making is amazing. It's a kind of art that I haven't done yet, like officially, but uh, it it's something so characteristic of uh, tabletop role-playing games.
Mhm.
It, it's I always envy those that are able to create these magnificent maps.
So Bill sent me this one. I'm going to guess this is Bill's.
That is
Your
that is my favorite piece of D&D art, hands down. Nobody asked, but
Surely it
I
tells a
shared it
story.
anyway. That
It's an
just,
adventure in itself. Like
yeah, the cover of the AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide
that one right
is it's
there.
perfection.
Yeah.
I absolutely adore that piece. David Sutherland did just such a phenomenal job. And you're right, you can make an entire story about that on the flyleaf on the inner cover there. I guess you'd call it page 0. There's actually a description of what's going on, and you can spin an entire adventure module off of what you're seeing in that painting right there. A party of adventurers squaring off against an Efreet sultan in the city of Brass on the elemental plane of fire. I mean, my God, what else could you ask for as a DM, right? Inspiration starts right when you pick the book up. And regardless of the art, that's what a good D&D volume should do. The art should reach out and inspire you regardless of what approach you're going to take.
exactly.
Bill, I
Yeah.
remember as a kid, and Michelle, you probably appreciate this. I remember as a kid, this book, the one right behind me. I remember thinking, hey, is it a good idea to pry the jewel out of the devil's eye like that? I mean, wouldn't that just scream curse coming right at you somewhere?
Yeah.
But who knows if that's a cursed one or not? But when I'm looking at that guy, I'm going, nothing good can come from that, right? It's just bad things happen. So
Yeah, I like to think that I don't remember where, on what setting this cover is. Um, but I like to think that there's people in this tavern and someone comes with a gem and think, okay, so I got from a statue and it worked fine. And then people are like, oh damn, that guy is just so lucky. I tried that last week and well, I lost 3 people in my party. And it's like this lottery, or like people are so they're so obsessed with being the winner, but it must be horrible for adventuring parties all over.
Yeah, there's, well, I like to tell people, I'm like sometimes people who haven't played will be like, well, how do you win D&D? I'm like, there is no win. It's not really how it works. It's a much different thing than that.
Yeah.
It's not about winning or losing. It's about playing and just spending time, outside of, it takes you out of your daily life to go do something else,
It's
which is
about
always the
having
goal. So
fun.
it's about having fun and doing something creative, which we don't get enough chance to do in most lives.
And
Uh,
when D&D first came out, Avalon Hill's in-house magazine, The General, now I'm talking about like 1974, they gave it a bad review because it had no win condition. That was one of their complaints. This war game has no win condition. How can this enter? How can you want to do this more than like once ever?
and now people are going, Avalon Hill who?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, it's sort of killed
Something
Avalon Hill.
I like to say to new players is that, well, there is a win condition, but it's up to you what that win condition is. What is a
Right,
win for your character?
There you go.
exactly. Well, for Bill as a DM, he's killed 2 of mine this year, so
All I've done is create opportunities for you to adventure in, Tim, and well, you chose certain options.
you never poke the owlbear and don't mess with weasels. That's really kind
Never
of
poke the owl bear or mess with giant weasels.
giant weasels. So, you got
Oh,
to be careful when you poke the bear. But anyway,
wow.
all right. Well, I thank you for your time. I don't like to let these videos run too long because otherwise nobody watches past a
Oh,
certain
sure.
point. But I will link your page for you, and I'll tag you when I post it over on Twitter. So hopefully,
Thanks.
we'll
It
get
was a
people.
pleasure to talk about it.
No, no, I love understanding people's process because I think if you're going to get more people into art or into science or into anything, people have to understand the process. Otherwise, it's just magic, right? It's like, yeah, one of my biggest discoveries in the scientific field. People went, "Oh my God, how'd you figure that out?" I'm like, "I've been in the lab for 6 months. I've run 250 experiments that failed. Right? We finally got one that worked, and it worked over
Yeah.
and over again. It wasn't just like happened to work once. It worked a whole bunch of times. Like, oh, it looks easy now. After you see all that other crap that went on." So I like people to see that process, and I love the fact that you have some of those on your page, and I think that's important for people to see. So I hope we see a lot more stuff from you in the coming years. And if you want to come back on, just give me a holler if you got something specific you
Oh,
want to talk
sure.
about, and we'll pump it up. And check out Bill's channel too.
Nice.
He's got an interesting one where he plays first edition D&D and first edition Gamma World.
Oh man,
Uh,
first
so
edition it's
Yeah, you
so
should
he
you should check out our Tuesday night game. Tim's character might get off, and that's always hilarious.
I it's I have a feeling it's
I'm
coming
going
next
to
week.
check that out.
But Gamma World's a good one too. So you got to check out the first edition Gamma World stuff. I'm not on that one, but he's got a great group of people. All right. Well, thanks
Nice.
everybody for coming by,